Yep, excitement on four wheels. And boys, that's Desoto for 1957. But before we look at it, let's turn the clock back a few years. You know, if you and I were selling cars back in 1919, style wouldn't have been a very important part of our sales pitch. Most cars were touring cars. Remember them, with flat surfaces and struts? They looked like other things that moved, airplanes, for instance. People accepted this shape of motion in 1919. Now, if we were still selling in, say, 1940, styling would have been a little more important than it was in 1919. Still, all cars were somewhat alike. They had a version of the teardrop idea of streamlining, just like the airplanes of the day. Again, fine. The blunt front represented beauty and speed in the minds of the motoring public. But today, well, just try asking folks their idea of what an airplane should look like. A plane that's beautiful to the eye and is fast. They'll say the plane should be long, with a pointed front to knife the wind, and a high sweeping tail for stability. In other words, they'll describe today's jet planes. Ask folks what they think today's automobile should look like, and they'll describe a long car, low in front to knife the wind with high sweeping tail fins, today's idea of beauty and speed, today's idea of the shape of motion. What car are they describing? Why, it's Desoto, of course. And it's ours to sell. Now, fortunately for you and me, competitive cars are still married to the blunt front design. In 1957, it's Desoto that has the look people want in an automobile. Yes, people will say, I like the looks of this car. But let's face it, fellas, hearing those kind words doesn't put any stake on our plates. We have to get folks to go farther and say, that car is for me. Yes, sir. Those are the words a salesman wants to hear. And how do we get the guy to say them? Well, if we can tell him a little bit about the thinking behind this jet-age car styling, if we can show him that Desoto didn't cut any corners on comfort or convenience and performance in order to get these sleek low lines, if we can convince him that with Desoto, he'll be leading the pack instead of struggling along with last year's mob, then we'll have him in the only mood we really care about during working hours, the mood to talk business. Why not start out by telling him the new Desoto is the result of a team of stylists and engineers working together so closely that you can't tell where one stopped and the other began. Just take the silhouette, for example. Now, it's not only dramatic with a capital D, but when you consider how low last year's car was, you wonder how they could possibly have made the 57 much lower. So what happens? Well, working together, the styling and engineering people got that silhouette down not just 1 inch, but 5 inches on the hardtops and on the sedans, over 3.5. So now we got a much lower, sportier looking car. But the important thing as far as engineering goes, there's plenty of road clearance. Most important to Mrs. Prospect, it's still easy to get into a Desoto, and she still has plenty of headroom for her new bonnet. And how did our team of stylists and engineers do this? Well, first, they designed a brand new roof. It's thin as a tarpaulin, but tough as a GI's battle helmet. They built completely new seats that cradle you behind the wheel like a pilot in a cockpit. They lowered the floor a couple of inches. And, of course, when they did that, they had to build a brand new frame and suspension system. Why, they even threw out the old air cleaner. Got a new one that not only fits the new low hood, but does a better filtering job, too. And what do we sell to the prospect? Why, we sell a car that's low for looks, with doors high and wide for easy entrance. A car that's low for looks and has headroom to spare for a 6-footer. A car that's low for looks with loads of leg room so that the six-footer can stretch out and relax and enjoy himself. A car that's low for looks, with a seat that makes you feel like you were built into the car. And we're still inside the showroom. We got a whale of a lot more to sell on the road. A lower car gives us a lower center of gravity, so there's no lean, no sway. This car sticks to the road like paper on the wall. Tell your prospect he'll never have to brace himself going around curves, never have to get a death grip on the wheel. He can be relaxed every second. And his wife can curl up for 40 winks anytime she feels like it, just like she does in her easy chair at home. Those seats are so comfortable. That torsion air ride is so smooth. Yeah, but the big thrill they'll get from the new Desoto is the feeling that they are actually part of the car. Everything fits together so perfectly. The shape of the seats, the tilt of the wheel, and, of course, all the controls are exactly where they should be. And that mammoth Vista View windshield, so help me, it looks out on the whole wide world. But more about that in just a moment. Now, you fellas know how some prospects like to ask questions. And when one of those guys gets in the new Desoto, here's one of the first things that'll pop into his mind. Just how big is this windshield? Well, you can tell him it's 31% bigger than last year's. A whopping 1,444 square inches of glass. In other words, 350 square inches of extra seeing space have been added to the windshield. That's a lot more glass, all right, but, brother, it's also a lot more visibility. And visibility is what your prospect's going to care about. Giant, midget, or Mr. Average, he can see the road right in front of the bumper. He can see the stoplight overhead. And with the aid of that new rear-view mirror, he can see all four fenders. What's more, his wife can see it, too, even if she's 5'2". Matter of fact, if she is a shorty, let's just make sure that she gets a chance behind the wheel, too. As for the rear window, that is 64% bigger than last year's. It sweeps right up into the roof. Now, up front, the headlamp opening takes on this interesting new form. A wide, hooded design to help the impression of low, road-hugging stability. And for better vision at night, dual headlamps are optional. There are a lot of new and unusual touches like that on the new Desoto Fireflight, but the feature that's most distinctive and really sets Desoto apart from all its competition is this pair of high, slanted tail fins with their clusters of lights, their sharp-looking chrome moldings, and that terrific stretch of deck lid in between. You can't get around it. That twin-tower taillight treatment really does make this car look fast. I don't know, but it seems to me it is worthwhile to tell a prospect that from an engineering standpoint, these fins are definitely functional, too. They're like fixed rudders. They help stabilize the car. The trunk lid's beautiful in itself. Looks like sculptured metal, doesn't it? And this license plate mounting is new. It's practical and different. And you know how anything that's different rings the bell with prospects. Now, while you're back there with a prospect, don't let him get away without seeing the inside of this trunk. Mammoth Cave, I call it. It's a fact that a 6-footer like me can lie down in here. Now, of course, there is a much prettier, much more comfortable place to ride in a Desoto. Let's look inside the car. We get in by using a brand new recessed door handle. And inside, we see a new throttle-type door handle. Both are much easier to use than the old-style handles. Now, you remember a while back I said something about the seats being formed like the cockpit of a plane? Well, that cockpit idea is carried out on the instrument panel, too, with all the controls focused, you might say, right at the driver's fingertips. All the dials are recessed under a deep hood, which keeps their reflections out of the windshield and makes them easy to read at a glance. And I think most folks will go for this idea of having the rear view mirror on top of the instrument panel. It's out of the way down here, so you get a wider sweep of vision. Something else that's new. You notice that the seat frame base is left exposed? Why? Because that old-fashioned, overstuffed look would be as out of place in this youthful, sporty car as a big bay window on an Olympic sprinter. Then there's deep pile carpeting all over the floor of the Fireflight. Wall to wall, you might say. And since that's a big deal in a house, let's call attention to it in a Desoto. No question about it. This Desoto interior is downright beautiful in the most modern meaning of the word. And there isn't a thing missing that anyone could want for his or her comfort. And talk about glamour. The roof bows inside are stainless steel, no less, with a perforated, sound-deadening headliner. Well, the Fireflight two-door Sportsman is only one part of the story, and no discussion of the 1957 Desoto line would be complete without a mention, at least, of some of the other Fireflight and Fire Dome models. There is a Fire Dome two-door Sportsman, as well as the Fireflight. And, of course, the glamorous Fireflight four-door Sportsman. Plus the low-priced, high-fashion Fire Dome four-door Sportsman. In four-door sedans, there's the popular Fire Dome and this Fireflight. By the way, how do you like this new aluminum upper door section? Smart, eh? And pretty clever. Lets folks who still prefer the regular sedan have the hardtop effect that everybody goes for. And this year, we've got two Fireflight station wagons. First, there's the smart Fireflight Shopper. Now, it's a two-seat model with room for a tennis court in that luggage space. And have a look at this, the Fireflight Explorer, a third seat that faces to the rear. There's a new modern feature to sell. But finally, for swank right off the Gold Coast, give a look at this Fireflight convertible and plan to look no further. This is it. The absolute end, I'm here to tell you. How about that 50% bigger windshield that wraps around at the sides and curves right into the top? Yes, sir, it's an exciting car we have to sell this year. And in my book, DeSoto's stylists and engineers have really outdone themselves to develop a car that's at least 2 years ahead of the pack. All this means a terrific year for us. We've got a line of cars that competition just can't touch. You know your prospect will like it. But will he like it well enough to say, that car is for me? Well, that's going to depend on us to some extent, for after all, we're the retail salesmen. With the terrific product we've got this year, he's sure to like it well enough to buy it, like it better than any competitive car, if we tell him how this stunning car has been styled and engineered for him to be just as thrilling and exciting for him to own and drive as it is to look at and admire. So, let's tell him.